We're going to move forward. All right. As I said, I started researching this, and y'all are going to see pretty soon why it gave me a headache, because I hope it doesn't give you one, and I'll understand if it does. Okay. The term ethics, quite frankly, comes from an ancient Greek word that translates as a habit or a custom. And right there, for me, that says, oh boy, if it's somebody's habit or custom, then it is particular to that person. My father's habit and custom was to wake up every morning at 4:30 and make steak and eggs for breakfast. And that's probably the only meal he ate the whole day. So, if you asked him what his morning ethics were, that would be included in it. Is it yours? So before we get started, I want everyone to kind of think about what ethics means to you. What does it mean? How do you define it? You don't have to post it if you don't want to, and if you want to share, that's great. But just what does it mean to you? And what does it mean to everyone else that you work with? Or what does it mean to your agency? And are they the same? Does that make sense? We're going to be coming at this from many different angles. Because quite frankly, what we think of as ethics is more of like a moral code, like it's our morality, our values, rights versus wrongs, or rights and wrongs, principles, ideas, mostly a value system that we have, that it comes from our conscience or the moral correctness of a specific conduct. But I'm going to ask you, whose morals, whose moral correctness, whose values, whose principles, whose ideas? These are all really important when we start thinking about this, not just for ourselves, not just for our families, not, you know, it needs to go further out to our neighborhood, our community, and particularly to our agencies and to the survivors that we work with. Okay, because I'm going to tell you right now, in my mind, Breitbart holds to their principles. I may not like their principles, but they hold to them. CNN also holds to their principles. Is there a right or a wrong here? According to whom? Are CNN's principles the same as CSNBC? So we're going to have to be, it's going to get hard sort of to pin down what ethics means and the various views that people have about ethics. And so describing it can be really, really shaky. Okay. Let's see what we got here. All right, so a few years ago, a sociologist by the name of Raymond Brownhart asked a group of business people a sample question, and the question was, what does ethics mean to you? And these were some of the responses that he got. The first one was, ethics has to do with my religious belief. Okay. The next one, come on. I have to talk to my PowerPoint. Being ethical is doing what the law requires. Ethics consists of the standard of behaviors our society accepts. Ethics has to do what my feelings tell me is right or wrong. And one person said, I don't know what the word means. I'm going to take a look at each of these responses, and I'm going to unpack them a little bit. Okay, so first we have ethics and religion. If ethics were confined only to religion, then it would only apply to religious people. But what religion are we talking about? One of my sisters cannot tell a lie because she learned very early in life when we went to Sunday school that if you tell a lie, you are going to go to hell. That's what she understood. And so to her, for her to tell a lie means that the flames of hell are licking at her heels. She will never tell a lie. Okay. So we have religion there. But Charlie Manson, who claims to be a really religious person, as did Jim Jones, they had their ethics confined to their religion. Do you believe in those religious beliefs that they had? Do you want to? I have met some atheists who are whose ethics I consider to be amazing, and I could say that an ethics applies as much to the behaviors of atheists or agnostic as it does to religious people. So this theory that ethics and religion are married is in part true, but maybe not totally true. Following the law. The law often incorporates ethical standards to which the citizenship subscribes to. That's fine. Can you think of examples of maybe things that ethics, where ethics can deviate from the law? Or societies where ethics has deviated from the law? How about something like Nazi Germany or the Jim Crow laws that we had in the United States, or apartheid in South Africa? Think about them and think about if they are maybe ethical or not ethical, and maybe why at a particular point in time they may have been considered ethical and why now they are not. This is a very different take on why the laws can deviate from what is ethical. Okay, ethics in society. It's not doing or the same as what society accepts. In any society, most people accept standards that are ethical, and most of these standards are pretty much the same. Okay, do no harm, which is the oath that doctors take or the oath that social workers take. But what does the phrase whatever society accepts? Does that mean taking a survey of everyone in my neighborhood, in my town, in my county, in my state to find out their ethical beliefs? And, you know, what does that mean? Some may have strong feelings for and against a particular topic, like maybe birthday parties. Some may have no opinion at all. I always try to use my family as examples. My dad, his idea about ethics also came down to the fact that keeping the family solvent, being able to pay the rent, whatever the household bills were, the food, whatever, keeping electricity that came on was more important than celebrating birthday parties. And as a kid, I was usually crushed because my birthday falls the day after tax day, where he had to pay his taxes, and it always seemed to fall during Lent, during Holy Week, Easter Sunday, or Passover. So I didn't get to have my birthday party on my birthday like my brothers and sisters generally did. I had to wait a week or two because for my family, following the code of ethics that they had, which was we keep the family solvent, we keep religion forefront in our mind, and I came from a very blended family, that these were important values. And so that's what I grew up with. Doesn't mean that it was right or wrong. It means that that is what I grew up with. Okay? So I cannot think of anyone who has decided to do a survey on an ethical issue as small as maybe birthday parties. But that would mean that if we're going to do that, would it have to be a unanimous agreement on issues? And if it isn't, does that mean you're morally corrupt? You understand the point I'm trying to get here is that we all have different values that we bring with us throughout our life that have been given to us throughout our life. So what we then also have are feelings. Being ethical is not a matter of following one's feelings, because our feelings frequently deviate from what is right. And I'll give you an example. It is one of my greatest joys to get out on the highways of West Texas and speed. Nobody's there, it's flat, and I'm going for it. And while I love to do that, I also know that if I get a ticket, I am going to have to pay a fine. And my job is dependent on me being able to pay the insurance on my card and hold on to my driver's license. So whether I like speeding, whether I dislike speeding or not, or what making the choice to obey the speed limit is something I do because I want to keep my jobs. And I think we all have issues where we pick and choose according to our feelings, that maybe going a mile or two over the speed limit is not an issue for us. Okay? But did you ever drive while you were intoxicated or high, or maybe feeling just a little bit tipsy? Ever know you or someone who goes target shooting in their own backyard when their kids playing outside, even if, even in rural areas? These are things that we have to say because it felt like the right thing to do at the time. This is not, these are things that I'm talking about, that basing ethics on this, maybe we need to look at it a little bit more. Okay. So generally, ethics is divided into three general areas. And have I made your minds boggled so far? Because I know that when I got to this point, I was already going woo! Okay, so we have the meta-ethics, which explores the status, the foundation, the scope, the values, the words, the focus, as in what is morality, what do you think the answer should look like, stuff like that. Normative ethics is the study of ethical actions, as in how a person acts, what is right and what is wrong. To put it another way, why a person chooses to apologize in one situation when they are wrong, and why in another situation when they are wrong they choose not to apologize. Ever done that? I know I have, and it may be to the same person or it may be to two different people, but it's similar. And this is where it's like, how did I make this choice? What was going on with me? Okay? Applied ethics is the philosophical examination of issues both private and public that are considered to be, quote, matters of moral judgment in an attempt to identify the morally correct course of an action in everyday life. So I'm going to ask you, do you get up in the morning, scratch your head, and think of ways that you're going to have an ethical day today? I don't. I don't know about you, but I don't. So what then does all of these mean? Because these are all three fields of study, and people get PhDs in this and teach on this, and we can carry on, because I know that my mind was just boggled by all of this. So we have another way, we have descriptive ethics that I didn't put in there, but it's empirical research into the attitudes of individuals or groups of people. And those working on descriptive ethics aim to uncover people's beliefs about such things as values. So they're digging a little deeper here. Moral ethics and community, whether we are in the workplace or in the neighborhood, it is to pursue the moral purpose of ongoing challenges that we, ongoing responsibility to engage in the communal process. Whose communal process? Does that mean that we vote? Does that mean that we go to PTA meetings? What does that mean? I don't know, but I think we each have to define it. When my children were in school, I considered it to be part of what I did as my responsibility as a parent. But once my children were out of school, I didn't consider that to be my responsibility anymore. Is that right? Is it wrong? Is it moral? Is it ethical? That was a choice that I made. Not necessarily ethical or unethical. So the next thing we're going to look at as ethics as a moral philosophy. Because basically it is a branch of philosophy that systematizes, which means arranges and organizes according to a plan or a theme. And that kind of upsets me when it comes to ethics. We're going to systematize, we're going to organize according to a plan or a theme, and yet when you think about that, that's exactly what work ethics are about. Or am I wrong there? It defends, which means to protect from harm or to safeguard what you're systematizing, and recommends concepts of right or wrong conduct suitable for a particular purpose or rule. So for advocates, it refers to probably what we consider to be right or wrong when we are working with the population that we work with, for the survivors that we work with. Okay, morals, here's the definition, and if you can think of another one, I'd like to know it, but from or between individuals in group, and may differ from society to society and culture to culture. So morals can have some gray areas in them, and ethics, is it the same for you or your coworker? If my coworker is the accountant or the bookkeeper for my organizations, I don't operate under the same guiding principles that they do, because they are looking at things from a fiduciary responsibility, while I'm looking at it as a responsibility to the people in the coalition that I belong to, and for those doing direct services, it is to your agency and also to the clients that you serve. So it's similar, yet it's different, you know. Do you hang out with people whose morals and ethics are different from your own? So if you do, does that reinforce for you your ethics? And if you don't, what does that say in terms of looking at things from a different perspective? All right, so that's what I wanted to get to here, morals definition. But the other thing I found as I was doing research then was the definition of ethics in English. And I'm thinking to myself, in English, does the definition vary if it wasn't in English? Does is it different in other languages? And so how does it distinguish between good and evil? Not just in English, but in other languages. Right and wrong. Who decides what's virtuous or non-virtuous? Is this nature versus nurture? Is there something in a good, better, best scale of ethics? I was totally confused. Totally confused here. So at its simplest, I'm thinking, what is ethics? And this is what I came up with, but then according to whom? So this is why we describe ethics as a moral philosophy. And philosophy means that there's lots of room for thinking and for arguments. So what then is ethics, I'm thinking? Is it a right to privacy? Does it resemble obligations? What does it do? I don't know. Does it imply values, virtues, honesty, compassion, loyalty? Can social norms deviate from what is considered to be ethical? Even if those norms state do not do harm to anyone, what does that mean in different cultures? Because what's considered harm? And is it necessary to constantly examine our standards to make sure we are doing no harm? I don't know, but I know that these are things that I have to think about and that boggle my mind when it comes to my especially professional life. So virtues are the very meaning and purpose of our lives. They are the content of our characters. It's the behaviors, the way we act that show morals and moral excellence. It's the opposite of a vice. It's a quality or a trait deemed to be morally good, so it's valued as a foundation of our character. Where do we get these ethics from? You know, we have ethics that we consider to be morally good, as in faith and hope and love and courage and justice and benevolence and dignity. And you can list them all for yourself. Tenacity, industriousness. These are all considered virtue. And that's great and fine, but how does each person value them? And how does each person define them? And that's what's important, because every major work on ethics holds that is a part of the central core of morality. So if justice means giving each person what they deserve, then what makes justice mutable? I don't know, but I think it's a question we have to look at. And what happens when people and agencies differ over what they believe they deserve? And people demanding to be treated with fairness and justice, and yet we think of one thing and they say another. And I'm going to give you an example. I worked with a woman a long time ago who refused to go to the food bank to get food because she told me it was beneath her station in life and I was causing her just as much abuse as the abuser. That was not my intention. I also know that that's how she saw it. I also know that her circumstances had changed, and I also know that was a deeply held belief for her because that was how she was raised, in a very entitled atmosphere from coming from a lot of affluence. Was she right? Was she wrong? Was I right? Was I wrong? Was the agency right? Was the agency wrong? You know, where do we make that perfect balance where we interact? In other words, how are decisions going to be made? And how are benefits and burdens going to be distributed in a fair way? It's just, you know, my thinking that justice at its core is based on if you want to call it social stability and interdependence and equal dignity for all. And when some members of society feel that they are being treated unfairly, that is the groundwork for social unrest or disturbance, especially within the agency and especially within the context of your working with a particular client. So how do we make this fair and equal? How do we explain the rules and the laws? And how do we move forward so it's fair and just for all? And when an individual, especially one of the clients, feels that they're being treated unequally based on something arbitrary and irrelevant to them, they're going to, again, feel violated. And the population that we all work with is already feeling violated. They're feeling vulnerable. They're feeling at risk. So how do we make that work? Because this is really part of the ethics stuff. So the principles of justice we can look at in a certain way that says if Joe and Jane do the same work without any relevant differences in their work, they should be paid the same wage, right? Okay, we got agreement there? But if one is paid more than the other based on merely their characteristics, male versus female, skin color, is that fair? But if they're doing the same work and someone was hired a month ago and someone's been there for 10 years, is that fair? You know, what is equitable and how do we move forward? Is it fair, then we move forward? Is it just, if we want to call it that if you're the first person in line to purchase a ticket to go to some concert or some show or some entertainment thing that you want dearly to go to, and then you need to go to the bathroom and you turn to the person behind you and ask them to hold this place in line for you, and you leave and you come back and everybody says get at the end of the line. Is that fair and just? What if somebody walks up with a broken leg and is standing in line and there are 20 people back and people start saying you can go ahead of me, but the people in the line behind you can say, is that fair or just? I'm going to call on my dad again. When people wanted to cut in line many years ago at the grocery store because they only had one item before there was, 10 or 15 items only, and said, can I go ahead of you? I only have one item. My father would turn around, look and see who was behind them, and he would say to them, personally, I don't mind, but you need to ask everybody else in line if it's okay with them. Was that fair and just? I don't know. So do we believe it's fair and just or unfair if a person is punished for something over which they had no control, or isn't compensated for a harm that they suffered, or that the compensation isn't forthcoming or isn't deemed enough? These are, these are questions that when we work in our field that we need to really understand and figure out. There's different kinds of justice, believe it or not. Social or distributed justice is the extent that society's institutions ensure that benefits are distributed. But what kind of benefits and to whom? Retributed or correctus is the fair and just punishment that takes into account the seriousness of a crime and the intent of the criminal. I have sat in court for many years, listening to abusers justify their behavior and telling Your Honor that they were not wrong, and then were handed a sentence that they thought was totally unfair and blamed it completely and totally on the victim for their misfortune. I have sat in court for many years, and I have seen or heard victims feel like the punishment, quote unquote, that was issued to their abuser was unjust or unfair. And then there's compensatory justice, and that's the compensation for injuries received. And for a lot of clients I worked with, this civil kind of justice was better justice for them than what they received in criminal court. So while it's all meant to be ethical, do all societies see these three forms as justice as being ethical? I've worked with people from different backgrounds who didn't even understand what these three kinds of justice were about, and wanted to have justice done to the abuser in a way that we would not consider, would even consider here in the United States. So, or in our legal stuff. So we need to understand what people are doing before we move forward with them, and we start even working with people so that we understand what is going on. Because quite frankly, justice isn't the only principle to consider when we're making decisions. Sometimes other moral claims, such as rights or society's welfare, need to be added into the mix. And that is really, really important. So we need to understand that and understand where the person is coming from. Because moral, ethical dilemmas is a situation where there's a choice, often between two options. Maybe neither one of them will resolve the situation in a way that's ethically acceptable. Maybe there's two options that are ethical. We don't know. But what happens when both options are right? When it is right versus right, how do we make that decision? What assumptions are we going to use to do that? So the other thing I want to talk about in a way is that an intervention into a complex system, and trust me, we are in complex systems, tend to create unanticipated and often undesirable outcomes or unintended consequences. Here we have actions that affect or effects that are unintended, and they can be broken down, into three types. The first one is unexpected benefits. Those are positive benefits, like the sinking of a ship in a shallow water can create an artificial coral reef, and that can be good for the environment, scientific study, and for recreational divers. And the second one is unexpected drawbacks. That is good intentions or desired effect with an unexpected drawback. Most governmental agencies have profanity filters on them, which they consider to be a good thing, and I don't argue with that. But TAASA is always happy to work with our governmental counterparts and agencies, and often we miss meetings or we don't get information from them or them for us because of the profanity filters, because sexual assault is in our title, and until that can be reset through IT to add us to the good list, this creates an unintended and unexpected consequence of people of people missing information or meetings. And the third one is negative results, totally contradictory to what was intended, and often makes the existing problem worse. It backfires on you. Anyone ever work with a survivor and have that happen to them? You suggest something that has absolutely no, and it backfires and makes it worse. You know, it's crazy making sometimes. So what I say is, good intentions do not sanitize a bad impact. Ethically, I think we need to think about what our good intentions are and to think them through to the conclusion and not just act upon them. I have yet to find a book or even a chapter in a book that talks about the unintended consequences, because sometimes there is a good, better, best approach to ethical decision making. I need other people to inform me what their good, better, best approaches are, and I go seeking it. But I'm going to show you an example of one. This is a gully in Australia. Once upon a time, it was a lush, rolling hillside, almost sort of like filled with all the brush that you see in the foreground. It was lush and frozen. Okay? Erosion? Nuh-uh. It's not erosion. This is in Australia. Back at the turn of the century, the powers that be in Australia thought that it would be a very good idea to introduce rabbits, which are not native to Australia, as a food source. Since the rabbits weren't native to these countries, at least initially, not keeping the rabbits in a pen caused the rabbits to run away, and rabbits did what rabbits do. They quickly multiplied, and you know what? The landscape changed because it was very friendly to them for their lifestyles, in terms of their lifestyles. So with the explosion of the rabbit population, with this lush landscape that gave them cover, that gave them food, that offered them almost at that time no natural predators, they evolved into being a major feral pest and have had serious unintended consequences both on the ecology of Australia and the environment. Okay, ethical decision. This is a framework for ethical decision making that I found. Okay, first is, are we trained properly? Are we prepared to go in? Do I and/or my agency have a measurable, shareable strategy with the folks who are already there, our partners who are there and have been doing the work before us, for the partners who are there who are doing the work now and that we are going to work with, and what is going to be our strategy after we go? It is determining facts. How do you ask the questions to get the facts? What are the ethical standards that are being considered and applied by all of the agencies? Are they all personal, the considering of the impact of values, all the personal and moral values that are involved with each agency? Consider how these combined professional knowledge, all this professional knowledge, which is fabulous, and their values and the aspects, how is it going to have the belief systems, the impact on not just you, but the client? Are they getting consistent information or conflicting information? What's going on there? Who are the stakeholders, and how do they define themselves, and how are they involved? In other words, are they stakeholders on the ground or stakeholders back in, you know, in the governmental offices, be it local or state or federal, that have a vested interest in this happening? How do we incorporate the literature for, quote, best practices? Standards of the people, the practices and the agencies and the policies, these are considerations, regulatory or legal considerations or consultations. How are we making our decisions? How do we explain it to everybody involved, including the populations that are going to be affected? And how do we support and secure the decision through documentation and evaluation and of the outcome of the decisions? What are they? How do we move forward? So with those in mind, I want us to go through some of and I asked you to download them, and if you haven't, you can read them. Some of these scenarios, and I deliberately stayed away from most of them pertaining to our field, because I want us to start thinking about how we can take what we know and apply and move it forward in what we are doing. So here we have Michael. He has two good friends, Roger and Daniel, and they don't know each other. Roger has told Michael that he has started dating this woman, and he is convinced that that's it, she's the one. When Michael observes them in a restaurant, when he's walking into a restaurant a few days later, he realizes that the woman that Roger is talking about is Daniel's wife. Daniel is deciding whether to tell Roger that the lady is married, and is to tell him that that the woman's married, when his friend Daniel calls him and tells him that he suspects his wife is having an affair. And he's asking Michael if he has heard anything regarding this affair. What do you do? What do you say? How do you deal with this situation? And this is where, if y'all have anything to say and you want me to unmute you, I'm happy to do that so we can all hear. But I want us to think about it. You know? I mean, several questions for me that came up with was, to whom does Michael owe a greater friendship to? Or does he owe a greater friendship to both of them? And no matter whom he tells, he's going to hurt somebody's feelings. So what does that mean in terms of their friendship? Anybody else have any ideas? Okay, so either I'm totally muted and y'all can't hear me, or I'm not talking to anyone because y'all have left, so I'm going to check. Okay. So just so that I know that people are out there, can you just chat in and tell me that you can still hear me and you're still here? You would tell them both? Okay, good. I'm glad you can still hear me, and I'm glad I'm here. Okay, so what would you do? But you don't have a mic. Kim, do you want to just tell me what you might want to do? I'm picking on you. Or you tell them both and let the chips fall where they may, even if you've known both of them for an extremely long time, and they're, you know, you're going to hurt them, and the consequence may be that they would never speak to you again, and you lost the friendship. it's a fact. It's a fact, and he has nothing to do with it. That's a good answer, Christopher. Michelle, I saw that you had said first that you would tell both of them, and that's pretty, that's pretty cool. I was in this, have you ever been in a situation like this? One time I was in a situation where I lived with a roommate. I had a roommate, and I had a really good friend. And my really good friend was engaged to get married. And for whatever the reasons, she thought that having an affair with my roommate was a good thing to do. Okay? When at some point her fiancé began to suspect that she was cheating on him. And so he called me up and he said, I think she's cheating, and do you have any information that you can share with me? And I was totally taken aback. I didn't know him very well, and my response to him at the time was, I think this is something that you need to discuss with your fiancé. Y'all need to have that communication. What was it right or was it wrong? And I don't know, but that was how I handled it. They did, and I did have a talk with my friend telling her that her fiance had called and what my response was, and that I thought that if she was still, needed to consider whether she really wanted to get married or not, and that was on her and not me. But everybody has a different way of looking at it. And again, there is no right or wrong here. Is there anything else anybody wants to say about this? We're going to move on to the next one. Yeah. And I like that, Anna, that you would tell her and give her the opportunity to talk. I think they're all fabulous responses. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong. It's just what dictates to you. Okay, here's Tony. He works for a casino. He's a data analyst. He has some missing data, and he knows that his coworker, Robert, had sent it to him in the past. He can't find it now. He knows the password to Tony's computer because he observed it, not that Tony gave it to him. So he thinks that if he goes to Tony's computer and he resends it to himself, he'll be able to get his work done. Well, the first thing he sees upon opening Robert's computer, is emails regarding all the gambling debts that Robert has placed. And it is company policy to A, not place any bets, and B, a violation of their tech regulations by logging into someone's computer. So by telling Robert what he knows means he has, he has done a bad thing. So what does he do? And what do you think should be done? And have you ever run into information like this? And in particular, how can you take this scenario right here and transmute it into the work that you do? Okay, Tony was unethical when he broke into Robert's. He should not use the information. Okay, he should not use the information he got, and he should not report him. All right, drop an anonymous tip to the casino, but also reach out to Robert to get the information you need. Okay, I think he needs to fess up. He did the wrong thing, but by not reporting Robert, he is committing another wrong. All right, I like all of these. I think they're all correct. Disclose it. You should own your own mistakes, but you cannot unsee what you saw. That's great. How about this? There are two wrongs here, in my mind. He should report it, the violation of that, and he should tell Robert. He's got two things. There's three things here. He should, in my mind, he should tell Robert, he should tell the casino, and he should fess up that he broke the company rules and let the chips fall where they may. Because what we see oftentimes, I think, with our clients is they don't want to tell us the truth because of, quote, bad acts that they have done. I'm not going to tell you that he was beating me because at that particular time, or raping me because at that particular time we were both drunk and using drugs. Did a crime still not happen? You know, we need to think about these things. How do we, if we don't see it this way, then how do we transmute this into bringing this into our real life situations, especially with our clients? Like in the first one, where Michael had to decide who he owed a greater friendship to. What if you go out and you see the abuser loving up some other person while he's still connected to, or still stalking, or still married to the survivor we're working with? What do we say? How do we do that? What goes on there? Okay, moving on to the next one. I call this this scenario, take 2 Xanax and call me in the morning. Anna works at the claims department of a major hospital. So right now, what are we running into? HIPAA laws. And there's a paperwork that she needs to get on. There's a traumatic mugging, and she sees what she's billing to and recognizes the name of one of the daughters at her child's grade school. Her daughter is really happy at her school. Anna knows that she cannot violate confidentiality, but she's not comfortable with having a potentially unstable person in a position of influence and supervision over her 8-year-old daughter. What do you do? What do you say? How do you act? Any ideas? Okay. All right, everyone has anxiety. Let me go back and let's see, because now they're coming in. Y'all are typing. Okay, let's see. Everyone has anxiety. Some people need additional help. The daughter is happy. She's not been harmed. Past students probably love the teacher as well. Get over the fact that she needs meds to control anxiety. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. She cannot release the information she learned, right? She could ask for her daughter to be moved to another classroom without giving away the information or the reason. That is also true. First, let's acknowledge that Alana has misconceptions about mental illness. Thank you, Melinda. All the woman is obviously, the victim is obviously seeking help. I'd leave her be. If the daughter is, especially if the daughter is happy and the help is working, and have more frequent conversations with the daughter to see if there's any actual cause for alarm. It's a good one. Check out the situation to make sure her teacher is stable, but if she is taking meds, then her issues are probably under control. And my question there would be, how do you check out the situation to make sure that the teacher's stable? Who are you asking, and how are you asking those questions in an ethical way? She absolutely cannot release the information, and every patient has the right to for their information to be private. She's taking steps to manage her anxiety and mood swings. If there's no prior history or cause for alarm, why assume that she will be harmful to anyone in the future? And this is black and white to me. I could not state anything about the patient's information. Okay, we have a lot of options here. Be mindful of any changes. However, if the daughter begins to bring up a challenge, speak directly with the teacher in general. Okay, these are all good. There's no rights or wrongs. I love this information. All I can say is that if it were me, I would say to myself, what's causing me the anxiety? Because apparently her daughter's happy. Nobody's had any complaints. No parents are complaining. So is this just me, or is this something that I need to be, or is it something that I need to be more cautious about or more thoughtful or mindful about in talking to my daughter or talking to the school? Again, I couldn't state where I got this information from, even if it was I inadvertently learned it in the course of my work. There are laws, and I agree. To me, this is black and white. I have also seen this one. Judy is 12 years old, and her mother promised her that she could go to a rock concert if she could save the money to buy a ticket. Judy saved $15 for the concert. The ticket cost was only $10, and she bought the ticket. Judy's mother, about a week and a half before the concert, changed her mind and told her that she had to spend her money on new clothes for school. Judy was disappointed and decided to go to the concert anyway. She not only bought the ticket, all she did was told her mother that she had been only able to save $5 and gave the $5 to her money on the day of the concert. On the day, Judy tells her mother she's spending the day with a friend, and off she goes. A week passes, and her mother never finds out. When Judy then tells her older sister what she did, Louise, her older sister, now wonders whether to tell her mother what Judy did. Okay, what's going on here in this family dynamic situation? And as you're typing in, I'm going to talk a little bit about what I have seen here as it relates to victims. We're good. Victims, dysfunctional families, let me put that, or dysfunctional family dynamic. The hallmark of it is the secrets that we keep. If it's the secrets that we keep, then information is power. All right? The information is power. So what is going on here with mom, first of all? And Michelle, I see you say because Anita needs to know that she can monitor a young child so she can follow the rules. Okay, I don't know how old Louise is, but she's older. For mom, for me, Judy was wrong. Yes, that's one thing that's going on. A lot could have happened, and we don't know the backstory on this. This is also true. Louise is in a difficult place because if she tells her mom, she loses the trust of her sister. Absolutely. If she doesn't tell her mother, Judy does not learn the consequences of her actions. And this is all very important stuff to know. Okay? What I'm thinking of, side note, why does a 12-year-old have to buy her own clothes? I understand this. This is information that we don't all have. These are things that happen when we're working with victims where we don't have the backstory. We get a snapshot of what is going on. We don't know what came before it. We don't know what came after it. We don't know how Judy was raised, the mom was raised, and why having to pay for, making a child pay for their own clothes is important. We don't know what the economic situation is. We don't know anything. We don't know why her mother changed her mind. You know, we don't know all these things. So was it, you know, what's going on here is a system that is not working, and everybody is trying to, quote, game everyone else. And it is a system that, quite frankly, I think is pretty not good. All right? So we have to understand that maybe what's necessary here ethically is some, for us, is if we're working with Judy because of her issues, we cannot do family therapy, or can we? And if we can do it, how do we make it ethical so that we bring everybody in here, so that there are ways and family rules and stuff that we learn and all this other stuff? It's very, very important for us to know this. Okay. All right. Right. Time frames to tell her why or what wouldn't happen, and what we're going to do and why not, and what the family rules are. Okay. Social worker who works with youth, in particular female youth, called into Dr. Laura's show with this dilemma. One of the program's 16-year-old females came to her and asked the social worker about information on abortion. The social worker does not believe in abortions on moral, ethical, and religious grounds, and would not give the child that information. The social worker had not talked with her clinical supervisor, had not talked since with the female client, and wanted Dr. Laura's blessing before she told everyone. Thoughts? Okay. Okay, the social worker should bow out and hand the case to another person. I agree with the social worker. I wouldn't call Dr. Laura's show. It's our job to provide information so people can make an informed decision regardless of personal feelings. There are, again, this is a gray area, and there's no right answers here. I believed in informed consent. I believe that everybody has their own personal morals and ethics and religious grounds that they bring with them to their work. We don't stop being ourselves when we leave. So how do we make sure, if we believe that abortion is wrong for all the reasons that we believe, how do we give information or bow out or what else? But you know what else I thought? She wanted Dr. Laura's blessing. I'm not trying to make light of Dr. Laura here. When I heard this on Dr. Laura's show way back when, well, I was driving my car and I almost crashed the car when Dr. Laura told her, no, honey, I stand with you. Don't give her any information. It's wrong, and encourage her to have the child. No information about how the child got pregnant, anything like that. It made me go and research Dr. Laura. Dr. Laura has a PhD, but not in the fields of counseling, psychology, sociology, or social work. It's like geography or geographical engineering or geothermal engineering or something like that. Doesn't mean that Dr. Laura doesn't have good intentions. I believe she does. I just believe that this was not her field of expertise and maybe shouldn't have said anything. Ever have a client come in and say, I'm tired of all of this. I wish it would end. I wish this had never happened. I am so, so overwhelmed. What do you do? What do you say? You know, for me, you have to ask questions. Yeah, because for me, it's how do you respond when the perception that basic moving forward is impossible? Or you feel like they need a lake and all you have is a glass of water. What do you do? Yeah, I agree, Michelle. A suicide assessment and safety plan is necessary in this case. That would be my first concern. And then my next would be asking the questions to find out what it was, where they're going. I think these are all excellent answers. And let's see. Ask questions and ask what she has tried, what she would like to try, remind her how far she's come, you know, other organizations. Is she in a support group? Who are they from? You know, you're thinking about hurting yourself, listening is the most important. These are all excellent, excellent examples, all excellent responses. Again, there's nothing right or wrong. It's just what do you do? Because you need to expect it, and it's going to happen. Here is another issue that I thought was really interesting. It's a group of high-profile civic leaders assembled for a year to do a community action initiative to find out what the community needs the most and move forward with the program or develop a plan to consider it. After endless meetings and research over months, the group decides to rescue a community-based hotline, okay? The representatives from the group meet with the hotline staff and participate in training to field calls and research similar resources in the community. After many scheduling delays, the groups hold an all-day meeting to develop an implementation plan. There's only 1 month left in the initiative's charter, and they never return to execute the plan or to bring new resources to the hotline or to improve its operations. Many years later, the civic leaders who were in there point to the lessons that they learned about the social service support system and how difficult it is to lead change in diverse community settings. These were lessons they learned, and that they agreed that they experienced them helped them become better community leaders. Okay, was this successful? Ethically, did they do what they were supposed to do in the time frame that they were supposed to do it? What steps could they have taken to bring about more concrete results? And failed. Yeah, I agree. So what lessons could they give back so that this could move forward? How do they do this? This is a total because whatever they learned, to me, the ethics here is, how did you move this forward? What was lost? So one of the primary factors that distinguishes social work from every other mental health profession is a commitment to social justice. And it applies to all advocates in social work fields. So this is a standard where it comes from, is social work. The profession was founded in social change, and that has sought to bring about and ensure that all people have access to resources and opportunities and other basic needs that allow them to live a, quote, better life, whatever that better life means for them. Hence the quote, "No one likes a loudmouth advocate." And that, I think, is really important. And first of all, I want to thank y'all for participating and sharing your views and listening to them and thinking, because I know that this is a hard thing to do. So my goal is, what do you do and how do you stay focused while respecting your client, their family, and their cultural values? Is that something that you consider as an ethic, and how do you do that? Do you push your comfort zone when their ethics and values are different from yours to try to understand that? But more importantly, do you disclose to your supervisors, co-workers, what you really think about them? You know, what do you think will or will not happen if you disclose that you don't like them? Are you able to still work with them? I mean, or does this affect how you work with them? I don't know. How do you talk to the client about uncomfortable topics? What do you do? Especially when you're sure that implementing an uncomfortable strategy will work in their case. What do you do? How does that move you forward? Where are your boundaries? Where are their boundaries? What about, you know, the thing that I left that's in the middle is, do you use yourself to engage your client and family? And how do you engage yourself? Do you engage yourself through cultural appropriation? Is that even ethical? Which cultural appropriations do you use? I have found myself at times using cultural appropriations, not in my behavior, but maybe in my language, by using such terms as, let's flip the script here, or something that may make it seem a little bit more emotionally connected rather than intellectually connected. All right. Any questions so far? Any words of wisdom anybody wants to share with us as we're winding down? Because cultural values are not inert deposits of verbal wisdom. They're just not. But they're vital realities which change through time. All right? I believe that social norms, social behavior, social values do change through times. What my grandparents held to be a social cultural value is not necessarily what I hold as a social cultural value. What my parents held, I do not necessarily hold. And it's not that I'm disrespectful, and it's not that I don't understand, but I also see my children, and they have come to different agreements about certain things that I may or may not agree with, and that's okay. It's their reality, and it changes through time, and I can still love them anyway, and I can still try to place myself in their shoes. Because we need to struggle for concern between local customs and beliefs while not compromising our own values. And how do you do that? When I worked in a supportive housing shelter, there were many victims of sexual assault. It was a dual shelter, and so we had victims of both interpersonal violence, just to put it that way, who lived there. A lot of them came from different cultural experiences. They had different concerns and different belief systems. They cooked different foods, and they listened to different music, and there was always an argument about whose food smelled, whose food was disgusting, who cranked up the music that hurt their ears, on and on and on and on and on. And when I would talk, when we would have our community meetings and these would come up, the best I could do at that time was to go back to the community standards. this is how loud we're going to play. No loud noises after 10 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock or whatever. Nobody's to be in the courtyard, da 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 da. These were the standards, and they held for everyone. And if your personal beliefs call for something different, at least your counselor needed to know about that, and then maybe we could problem solve if you felt then between you and your counselor when you came up with, or your advocate, you came up with a solution to it, to bring it to a community meeting and we could see how we could work it in. And that was the best that I could do, because I couldn't do any more than that. So I think that even though we can agree and disagree with certain things, we need to understand how culture and language adds to different understandings of health and illness and death, so that we can be prepared when our clients talk to us about certain issues, to understand what that means for them. Because one of my mentors told me a long time ago, trauma is in the eyes of the beholder. The physiological response in humans is the same across the universe, but the understanding of it, of how, and the symptoms of trauma and how people try to self-soothe is going to change with their view of their ethics, their culture, their wisdom. And ethically, I think that if we're going to work with a population that has been abused, we need to understand that and make that part of our curiosity, a part of our ethics. Not saying we have to incorporate our morals and our values into it, just saying that that's what we need to do. So for any additional information that you may think you want to read or look at, social and political action, here are some of the places where I pulled some information from, and you're welcome to look at it. Here is, and this is in the PowerPoint that's coming, here are the resources that I used. It will also be in the PowerPoint that's coming. And if you need anything regarding webinars, you can contact me specifically about this webinar, or send an email to webinars, WEBINARS, at TAASA.org. And for your CEs, please include the date, the time, and what you, the date, not the time necessarily, but the date and the title of the webinar. Send your request for CEs there, and you will receive them about in 10 business days. I thank you so much for your participation today. I'm going to put up the post-test. If you want to take it, I would be happy for you to do that, and you should be seeing that right now. Again, thank you all. I'm still on the chat, so I can see if there's anything you want to ask.